Claire was in my kitchen before the coffee finished dripping, and that alone was enough to make me careful. My daughter had always been a late arriver. Even as a girl, she moved through mornings like they owed her an apology. So when I came down the hall in my undershirt and flannel pajama pants, and found her standing at my counter at 6:30 on a Thursday, already dressed in a navy blazer with her hair pinned back neat, I knew the day had taken a wrong turn before either of us said a word. Then I saw the glossy brochure beside the orange marmalade. It sat there, square with the edge of the placemat yellow sticky note attached, the kind of tidy little setup that tells you somebody's been rehearsing. I stopped at the mouth of the kitchen and put one hand on the chair at the head of the table. My house was a brick ranch out past Vandalia, built in 1981 when interest rates were ugly, and I was young enough to think ugly things could be outworked. The kitchen still had the oak cabinets. Maggie picked out the brass pools polished by years of use. The old wall clock over the pantry that ran 2 minutes fast because my wife used to swear that was the only reason anybody in this family ever got anywhere on time. Claire turned when she heard me. "Morning, Dad," she said, too bright. I let myself in. "I can see that." She gave a little smile like I was kidding, then reached for the coffee mugs. Not mine. The mugs. Both of them. She already had one waiting at my place. That was the second wrong thing. People think age makes you notice less. Most times it makes you notice more. You've seen enough mornings to know when one has been arranged. I walked to the counter and took a breath over the coffee before I poured. Good Colombian stuff from the tin Elaine at the office kept getting me for Christmas, even though I told her the Folgers I'd drunk for 40 years had done no permanent damage. Claire had put out a little plate of toast cut on the diagonal, the way Maggie used to do for company, and 2 pats of butter already softening on a saucer. "You're up early," I said. "I wanted to catch you before work. I've been catchable for 71 years. That got another quick smile, thinner this time. She sat down before I did and folded her hands over a yellow legal pad. There was a leather folder on the chair beside her purse. Through the half-open zipper of the purse, I could see her reading glasses case a lipstick tube and the edge of what looked like a bank envelope. I took my mug and sat at the head of the table. The chair gave its usual creak. Claire's eyes went to the brochure for half a second and then back to me. "How have you been sleeping?" she asked, like an old man with a furnace that knocks twice before the heat kicks on. "Dad." "What, I'm serious." "So am I." She drew in a breath through her nose. Claire had her mother's chin and my side of the family's eyebrows dark and straight enough to make her look sterner than she meant to when she was young. Lately, she had started arranging her face for conversations before they happened. That morning, it was the face she used in boardrooms and hospital waiting rooms. Soft voice, steady eye contact, the look of a person carrying an unpleasant truth more gracefully than anybody else in the room. "I've been thinking about you," she said. "That can't be healthy." "Dad." There it was again. Not annoyance. Containment. I rubbed my thumb along the rim of the mug and looked out the kitchen window over the backyard. The grass needed its first proper cut of spring. At the fence line, Maggie's hydrangeas were still bare sticks with little green fists starting at the nodes. Past that sat my old F-150 under the carport, blue paint oxidized on the hood ladder rack, rusting at the joints. A regular Ohio morning. Damp gray, still carrying a little of March's chill, even though the calendar had given us April. Claire reached across and nudged the toast plate closer to me like I might not know what breakfast was without assistance. "You've seemed tired," she said, "and a little scattered. I misplaced a socket set last week. It was in the mudroom. That's not what I mean." "No." She lowered her voice another notch. "You repeated yourself twice at Sunday dinner." I looked at her. "I'm 71, Claire. I earned repetition. I'm not trying to upset you." That was the first line that made the coffee taste different. She said it gently. That was the trick of it. Claire had learned somewhere along the way that if you wrapped an insult in concern, people would often blame the person who flinched. I reached for the marmalade, and that was when I picked up the brochure, fully for the first time. Silver Pines Senior Living. There was a photograph on the front of a white-haired couple laughing over a board game they had no earthly reason to find that funny. On the back, a list of services ran in blueprint: medication management, memory support, housekeeping chef, prepared meals, transportation coordination. I let the brochure rest in my hand a second too long. Claire spoke before I looked up. "I just wanted you to have some information." "About what?" She pressed her lips together. "About options." "Options for what?" "For later. For planning. For being realistic." The kitchen got very quiet then, except for the old refrigerator humming by the pantry and the little click the wall clock made before the minute hand moved. I set the brochure down carefully. "Claire," I said, "I still drive to work. I still sign payroll. I still climb the back warehouse stairs without holding the rail. What exactly are we planning for?" She leaned forward in that blazer like she was about to present a quarterly report. "No one's saying this has to happen now. No one." I noticed that word more than the rest. "No one," I said. "Who's no one?" She waved one hand like the question was beside the point. "I'm just trying to start a conversation before we're forced into one." "We." "Dad, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." That one landed. I have spent most of my life being the man people called when they wanted hard things carried without fuss. I started Brenner Industrial Supply, with one truck, a leased cinder block warehouse, and more nerve than cash. I buried my wife at 55 and showed up at work 2 days later because 23 people were counting on me to sign checks. And because going back to the office felt simpler than coming home to her coat still hanging by the door. I paid Claire's tuition, put her in a condo after college when the market was bad, made room for her at the company when she decided marketing in Columbus wasn't for her after all. I had not made a habit of making things harder than they needed to be. But there she was, talking to me like I was an elderly uncle found wandering near traffic. I picked up my toast, put it back down untouched, and looked again at the brochure. There was a yellow sticky note on the inside flap. "Nice tour. Ask for Janice. Tuesday, opening possible." My eyes stayed on that last word. Possible. "This isn't information," I said. Claire's shoulders tightened, though her voice stayed smooth. "It's just preliminary. There's a note in here. I called to see what they offered." "You called?" "Dad, that's not a crime." "No," I said. "But it's not nothing either." She exhaled like she was the one being made to suffer. "You've had some moments lately." "What kind of moments?" "You missed lunch with me 2 weeks ago. You changed it from 1 o'clock to noon in a text I didn't see until 12:40. She blinked. "Well, there have been other things." "Name one." "You asked me on Sunday whether Ethan's baseball season had started, and I'd already told you it had." I almost laughed at that, but there wasn't enough humor left in the room to hold it. "My grandson is 12, I said. "He starts a season every time the weather changes." "Dad." "No, go ahead. Build the case." A flush rose in her cheeks then. Not shame, exactly. Irritation. I had stepped outside the script. She reached for the legal pad and turned it slightly, and I saw 3 headings in her handwriting before she moved her hand over them. Safety. Routine. Next steps. I looked at her hand covering the page. Then I looked at the rest of the table. My old placemat. The sugar bowl Maggie bought at a church bazaar in '94, a butter knife laid perfectly straight. Claire's purse half open beside the leather folder. The brochure centered like a summons. My own coffee already poured before I'd walked into the room. Every piece of it told the same story. She hadn't come to have breakfast. She had come to conduct one. A memory came over me so quick, it didn't feel invited. Claire, at 13, in the passenger seat of my truck, knees bony in denim shorts, asking whether I could stay for her choir concert that night. Me with a supplier problem in Indianapolis and a head already full of numbers. I'd told her I'd try, which in those years was often father language for no. Maggie had gone quiet beside the sink when I said it. Claire had nodded like it was nothing and looked out the windshield the rest of the ride. There are moments that don't seem expensive when you buy them. You only find out later what they cost. Claire was talking again. I'm not attacking you. I'm trying to keep things from turning into a crisis. That's what responsible people do. Responsible people. I repeated it in my head once and felt something inside me shift from confusion to caution. She mistook the silence for progress. There are places now that don't feel institutional, she said. They're warm. They're dignified. People have independence, but with support. It doesn't have to mean Claire. She stopped. I kept my voice level. Did you speak to anybody else about this? Her eyes moved away from mine for the first time that morning, just a flick toward the window and back. Too quick for somebody who wanted me not to notice. Too slow for me not to. It's just been a few conversations, she said. With who? I talked to Silver Pines, obviously, and I asked a couple questions at the office because people are worried about continuity, whether they say it or not. And I may have spoken to Daniel's office, just in general terms. Nothing formal. I'm trying to be practical about both your living situation and the company, Dad, because somebody has to be. Because somebody has to be. She said it softly, but there was a little steel under it now, the kind that had been waiting all morning for a reason to show itself. I looked at her over the coffee mug. Continuity, I said. That what I am now? You know that's not what I mean. It's exactly what you mean. She sat back and folded her arms, then seemed to remember that folded arms made people look defensive and unfolded them again. Claire had learned presentation somewhere along the line. The trouble with people who learn presentation is they start to trust it too much. They think tone can carry things facts won't. I'm trying to be respectful, she said. Respectful would have been asking me before you started discussing my life with strangers. They're not strangers. Silver Pines is full of strangers to me. Her jaw moved once. I didn't say I'd signed you into anything. No. You just asked about Tuesday. She glanced at the brochure before she could stop herself. That told me enough. The old clock over the pantry clicked again. The furnace knocked in the hall and pushed a wash of warm air over the floor. Somewhere outside, a trash truck ground its way along the county road. Hydraulic arms hissing the ordinary sounds of a weekday morning, carrying on while my daughter sat at my table trying to move me into the next stage of my life like she was changing out office furniture. I set the mug down carefully so it wouldn't clatter. What did you say to Daniel Mercer's office? Her lips flattened. Nothing dramatic. I asked what succession usually looks like when there are concerns. Concerns from who? Dad. No. From who? From family. From people who care about the business. From me. There it was again. Me. She kept saying practical words, but every practical word had a thumbprint on it. I looked toward the leather folder by her chair. And the office. Who'd you talk to there? I'm not going to turn this into a list of names. That's exactly what it is already. She shook her head and gave a tired little smile that didn't belong on a daughter's face. It belonged on an administrator's. You've been forgetting things, she said. You've been leaning harder on Elaine. You leave early some days. You ask people to repeat themselves. Everybody sees it. Everybody. A funny thing happens when somebody starts telling you what everybody sees. 9 times out of 10, they're trying to keep you from checking whether everybody sees it at all. I thought about the last month at the office. Randy from shipping stepping in too fast when I reached for the top shelf in the supply room. The banker from First County asking me over a chicken breast at the Rotary lunch whether I'd thought about lightening my load this year. Even the way Claire answered for me at Ethan's birthday party when her husband asked if I still went in every day. Most of those things had slid past me at the time. Or maybe not slid. Maybe I had nudged them aside on purpose. That was the part I liked least. I had spent 16 years telling myself Claire was sharp, high-strung, sometimes maybe too hungry for certainty, but still my girl. The one Maggie worried over in a different key than she worried over me. The one I had not always known how to reach but never stopped feeling responsible for. So when little things had started to tilt wrong, I had done what men like me often do. I called them timing, stress, a daughter carrying too much. You can stay silent for a long time if silence helps you keep the version of your family you know how to bear. Claire saw something change in my face and leaned forward again, gentler now. "I'm not your enemy," she said. "I'm trying to keep you safe." That word made me think of Maggie in the last winter before the cancer took its final turn. One hand curled around a blanket on the couch, telling me from under 3 Afghans that Claire was angry with me in ways she didn't know what to do with yet. I told Maggie anger was better than drifting. At least, anger stayed near the house. Maggie had looked at me for a long second, tired and too wise for my liking. "Walt," she said, "not everything that stays near the house is love." I hadn't liked hearing it then. I liked it less now. "What exactly am I unsafe doing?" I asked. Claire let out a breath through her nose, almost relieved to have something concrete. "Living out here alone for one thing, climbing basement stairs, driving before daylight, running a company when you missed details. I missed lunch with you, and you repeated yourself. I repeated myself to my own family at Sunday roast. You left the side gate open last week. The latch sticks when it rains." She was quiet for a beat. Then, "You almost signed the Peterson invoice twice." That one gave me a small jolt. Not because it was true, because it wasn't. "I caught a duplicate printout," I said. "Elaine was standing right there." Claire shrugged one shoulder. "That's exactly my point. Elaine's already doing half the catching." The room went very still. Not loud stillness, not movie stillness, just the kind that comes when one person has stepped a little too far over a line and both people know it. I looked at my daughter's face and saw something I had managed not to see clearly until then. It wasn't panic for me. It wasn't just resentment either. It was assessment. She had been watching what she could use. That realization cost me more than the brochure had, more than silver pines. Because a facility is a place. A note is a note. But to understand that your own child has begun sorting through your weaknesses for leverage that empties out a room. Claire must have seen something in me close off because she softened again right away. "Dad, listen to me. I know this is hard. I know you hear all of this as if I'm trying to take things from you. You are. That's not fair." I laughed once without humor. "No, what's not fair is waking up in your own house and finding out your daughter has been having side conversations about where you ought to live and who ought to run what you built." Her voice sharpened. "Built? You didn't build that place alone." I nodded once. "That's true." She looked almost startled that I'd given her that much. "I'm not saying you didn't work hard," she went on, "but this whole thing where you act like everybody else is just orbiting your effort gets old, Dad. Some of us have spent years there too." There it was. Finally. Not the whole thing, but more of it than she had meant to show. I looked down at the untouched toast, the butter gone glossy at the edges, and for one strange second I saw another morning 20 years earlier. Claire at the same table with college brochures spread out instead of nursing home ones. Maggie pouring coffee and saying we would make it work somehow. Me doing figures in my head before I spoke. Tuition housing books gas the way money could make itself known in a room before anybody said a number out loud. Claire had wanted Northwestern then. Marketing, Chicago, big buildings, real agency offices, something faster than Ohio. I had written the checks, helped with the condo deposit, bought the used Honda with the clean Carfax, then gone back to work Monday, like fathers in my generation often did when they loved somebody enough to bankrupt themselves a little. The call that brought her home came 6 years later. Burned out, bad breakup, agency folded. I told her there was a desk open in the company if she needed a landing place. Maggie said not to call it a landing place where Claire could hear me. I hadn't understood why that word bothered her. Sitting there now, I thought maybe I did. Claire had not wanted a landing place. She had wanted proof she had finally arrived. And I had put her in a glass office down the hall from mine, given her a title, trusted her with market accounts, and figured the rest would take care of itself. Work to me had always been the solid shape love could take. Maybe to her it had looked like terms. Who else, I asked. Her eyes narrowed. What? At the office. Who else have you talked to? She stared at me a second, then looked past my shoulder toward the sink. A few people. Names? Dad. Stop talking to me like I'm under oath. Then stop acting like I'm already under review. Her mouth tightened. I waited. She was the first one to look away. Randy mentioned he worries about you pushing too hard, she said. And Melissa said you've seemed distracted in meetings. I only asked because I'd already been noticing things myself. Melissa, 29 years old, still said circle back, like she got paid by the syllable. And the bank. She hesitated. I asked what would happen if there needed to be a transition. I nodded slowly. So that was it. She had not just been worrying privately, she had been going around me in widening rings, building a version of me in other people's minds. Not senile. That would have been too crude, too easy to challenge. No, she'd done it in the way smart people do damage now, through concern, through little practical questions. Through the suggestion that a difficult conversation was already overdue. The emotional cost of clarity is that it kills hope in real time. I had spent most of the morning wanting to believe this was fear wearing bad manners. But fear doesn't usually leave a paper trail. Fear doesn't sound out succession at the bank. Fear doesn't take notes under headings called next steps. Did Ethan know you were coming here this morning? I asked. The question caught her off guard. No. Why would he? No reason. There was a pause. Then she said almost gently again, You don't have to make me the villain because I'm the only one willing to be an adult. That one hit a deep place. My father used to say that when people call themselves the adult in the room, what they usually mean is they've already decided nobody else gets a full vote. I stood up from the table, took my mug to the sink and rinsed it, though it was still half full. I needed the movement, needed the faucet noise for a second, needed my back turned so she couldn't study my face while the old wound in me shifted around and found a new edge. Because the hardest part was not the company. The hardest part was understanding all at once that this was the same ache with newer furniture. Claire asking in her own hard way whether I had ever really seen her as something other than duty and structure and need. And then answering that question for herself by deciding she could now manage me the way she believed I had always managed everything else. When I turned back around, she was watching me with that same measured expression. We should at least tour the place, she said. Just so, there's a plan. No. Dad. No. Her chin lifted. You can say no today. That doesn't mean there won't be a point where the decision gets bigger than you. That was the sentence, the one that cleared the last of the fog. Bigger than you? Not discussion, not care, not help, authority. The doorbell rang before I could answer. Claire startled and half rose from her chair, smoothing the front of her blazer with both hands. For just a second, something close to expectation crossed her face. Not confusion, not annoyance at the interruption. Readiness. She thought somebody was arriving for her side of the morning. I felt my pulse once in my throat and then settle. Were you expecting someone? I asked. Her eyes flicked to me. No. She lied too quickly. I walked past the table, past the brochure and the legal pad and the toast gone cold and into the front hall. The house smelled faintly of coffee and furnace dust and the lemon oil I used on the banister every few months because Maggie used to. The side light beside the front door threw a pale square across the hardwood. I opened the door. Daniel Mercer stood on the porch in a charcoal overcoat, leather folder under his arm, his silver hair damp around the temples from the mist outside. Beside him stood Elaine Foster in a camel coat with her old brown legal pad folded in half in one hand, just the way she carried it when she didn't trust a room yet. For a second, nobody said anything. Then Daniel gave me a small nod. Morning, Walt. Over his shoulder, the sky hung low and grey over the yard, and the wet branches of the maple by the drive clicked in the wind. I stepped back. "Come on in." Behind me from the kitchen, I heard Claire's chair legs scrape the floor. Elaine came in first, wiping her shoes carefully on the mat without looking toward the kitchen yet. Daniel followed, buttoning his coat loose with one hand. Neither of them looked surprised to find me in house slippers. Neither of them looked embarrassed to be there. That told me something too. I led them down the hall toward the kitchen, and with each step something in me moved from hurt toward a harder kind of steadiness. Not comfort. That was gone now, but shape. The kind a man reaches for when he finally knows which pain belongs to the day he's in. Claire was standing by the table when we entered, one hand braced on the chair back. Her face changed fast. First surprise, then calculation, then a polite smile put on a little too carefully. "Daniel," she said. "Elaine." I didn't realize Daniel set his folder on the table with the kind of calm that makes noise unnecessary. "I came by to confirm a matter, Mr. Brenner, and I finalized." "Last evening," he said. Claire's eyes moved to me. The room felt suddenly smaller, as if all the air had pulled tight around the edge of that leather folder. Daniel rested his fingertips on it for one beat, then looked at my daughter and said, "The transfer of company control was executed yesterday evening." Claire's face didn't go white all at once. It happened in stages. First the eyes, then the mouth. Then the whole careful arrangement of her mourning seemed to loosen around the edges the way tape peels back when the weather changes. The transfer of what she said. Daniel Mercer opened the folder, drew out a set of papers, and laid them on the table with more courtesy than the moment deserved. Operational control of Brenner Industrial Supply, effective immediately. Supporting trust provisions were executed at the same time. Claire looked at me, not him. I stayed where I was at the end of the table. "Sit down," I said. It came out calmer than I felt. That was all right. At my age, calm has done more useful work for me than heat ever did. She did not sit right away. Elaine stood off to one side near the counter, coat still on legal pad in hand, saying nothing. That helped. If she had looked triumphant, it would have spoiled the thing. But Elaine looked exactly the way she always had when something hard and necessary had to be done, steady and comfortable with spectacle, willing to stand there anyway. Claire finally lowered herself into the chair she had started the morning in, though she didn't lean back. She sat forward, both hands flat on the tabletop. "You did this without telling me." "Yes." Her eyes flashed. "After everything I've done for that company." Daniel shifted slightly, perhaps to speak, but I raised a hand and he let it be. "This part belonged to us." "It wasn't done to you," I said. "It was done because of you." That landed. I saw it. She glanced at Elaine, then as if maybe this could still be turned into something else. Miscommunication, pressure, manipulation by outsiders. "You knew about this?" Elaine met her eyes. "Yes." "And you just stood there while he—" "Careful," I said. Claire turned back toward me, stunned more by my tone than by the papers. I had not used that voice on her in years. Probably not since she was 15 and thought lying about a wrecked fender would work if she sounded offended enough. Daniel slid the first page closer to her. "Your father executed the documents yesterday evening in my office. Witnessed, notarized, and filed this morning. Mrs. Foster assumes operational authority. Minority shares are held in trust for Ethan and Lucy." At the mention of her children, Claire actually laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "My children?" "Yes," I said. "Your children. Not you." "Why?" One word. No polish on it. No presentation. For the first time that morning, she sounded like my daughter instead of somebody's consultant. I looked down at the brochure beside the marmalade. Silver Pines Senior Living. A little square kingdom she had tried to set on my table between the butter and the toast. I reached over, closed it, and moved it aside. "That right there is why I said." Her face hardened again. "Because I'm trying to make sure there's a plan No, because you didn't come here with a plan. You came here with an arrangement. Daniel lowered his gaze to the papers. Elaine watched the floor for a second, then lifted her eyes again. Neither one of them moved. Claire let out a breath like I was forcing nonsense on her. Dad, that's not fair. It's exactly fair. You didn't ask me what I wanted. You didn't ask whether I was all right. You started talking to facilities, the bank people at my office, and Daniel's office too, and then you came in here and set this table like my life was an agenda item. I was trying to protect you. From what? She opened her hands. From what happens when people wait too long? I nodded once. And who decided I was already one of those people? Her voice rose a little then, not shouting, just enough to crack the smooth finish. You miss things now. You lean on Elaine for everything. You act like nothing's changed because that's easier for you than admitting you're getting older. I looked at Elaine. Do I lean on you for everything? No, she said simply. Claire turned toward her angry now. Of course you'd say that. Elaine didn't blink. I'd say it because it's true. That shut the room down for a second. The thing about truth when it comes from the right mouth is that it does not need embellishment. Elaine had been in the company 26 years. She knew where every weak beam was in the building and in the people. She also knew exactly how much of my work I still did, because half the time she was in the room when I did it. Claire looked from Elaine to Daniel, and then to me, and what she found in all three faces was the one thing she had not expected to meet that morning, a world that did not automatically bend around her explanation. You chose her over me, she said. There it was. Not the company, not the home, not continuity, the old wound walking in without its coat on. For a second, I was back in the hospital room 16 years earlier, Maggie sleeping under a thin blanket while the IV pump clicked Claire, standing by the window with her arms crossed, angry at everything she couldn't name. After Claire left to take a phone call, Maggie had opened her eyes and said, She keeps trying to win a contest. Neither of you will admit you're in. I had told her there was no contest. Maggie had been too tired to argue, so she just looked at me the way women do when a man they love has mistaken hope for accuracy. Now standing in my own kitchen with cold toast on the table and transfer papers between the sugar bowl and my daughter's hands. I understood what Maggie had seen long before I let myself. This isn't about choosing her over you, I said. It sure feels like it. No, I said. What it feels like is losing something you already decided was yours. Her mouth opened, then closed. I went on before she could recover her footing. You think because you stayed close, because you worked there, because I made room for you, that eventually all of it would pass naturally into your hands. And maybe if you had loved the work more than the authority, maybe if you had cared more about carrying it than possessing it, that might have been a conversation, but that's not what happened. Color rose in her face again. You have no idea what I've carried. That was fair enough that it hurt. No, I said quietly. Maybe I don't. That part belongs to me. The room shifted then. Claire had not expected that either. She had come prepared to fight my denial, my pride, my supposed confusion, not my honesty. I took a breath. The furnace kicked on again in the hall. Somebody's dog barked twice outside and then quit. When your mother died, I said I thought the best thing I could do was keep the floor from dropping out. House paid, tuition handled, office steady, everybody fed. I thought if I kept enough things from breaking that would count as love, you could live inside. Claire looked away. I know now that it wasn't enough, I said, or not enough in the way you needed, and I'm sorry for that. But what you did with that hurt is still your doing. Her eyes came back to mine, wet but furious. So this is punishment? No. I shook my head. This is consequence. She laughed again, but there was no confidence left in it. For asking hard questions, for deciding the answers before you asked them. I laid my hand flat on the table. The old oak under my palm was nicked near the edge where Claire had once dropped a juice glass in 3rd grade, and Maggie had said not to sand it out because family furniture ought to be allowed to remember something. "You didn't come here to help me live Claire," I said. "You came here to arrange me. You started walking around me with concern in your mouth and authority in your pocket. You spoke to people as if my life had already tipped into your management. That ends here." For the first time all morning, she had nothing ready. Daniel cleared his throat gently. "Your father remains fully competent to determine his residence and personal affairs. These documents address only business control and trust structure. There is no legal ambiguity." Claire didn't even look at him. She was still looking at me like the papers had become secondary to something worse. "You really think she loves that place more than I do?" she asked, nodding toward Elaine without turning. Elaine answered before I could. "This isn't about love as a feeling, Claire. It's about stewardship." Claire stood up so fast the chair legs scraped back hard against the floor. "That's easy for you to say. You got rewarded." Elaine took the hit without changing expression. "No. I got responsibility." The silence after that was deep enough to sit in. Claire looked suddenly tired. Not softer, just stripped down to the part of herself I'd spent years not wanting to study too closely. "I was trying not to let everything turn into chaos," she said, but even she could hear the weakness in it now. I nodded, and I was trying for too long not to see what that effort had become. She picked up the Silver Pines brochure, folded it once, then seemed to realize she had no use for it and set it back down. Her hand trembled a little. "That cost me more than I wanted it to, because justice is cleaner than reconciliation, but it is not painless." "I don't know what you want me to say," she said. I looked at her for a long moment. There are times in a man's life when he understands that saying less is not avoidance. It is accuracy. "I want you to understand me," I said. "I am old. I am not finished. And I am not a chair you move because it suits the room." Her eyes shut briefly. When she opened them again, something had gone out of the argument, though not out of the hurt. She grabbed her purse and the leather folder from the chair, then stopped. "What am I supposed to tell the kids?" "That their grandfather made his own decisions?" I said. She swallowed, nodded once without agreement, and walked out. The front door opened, then shut. Her car started in the drive a few seconds later. None of us in the kitchen moved until the sound of it had faded down the road. After that, Daniel gathered the papers into order and explained what needed explaining in the plain, dry voice lawyers use when they know the real event has already happened. Elaine took off her coat finally and set Maggie's old brass key on the table beside her legal pad. "I found it in the top drawer," she said. "From the old office." I picked it up. For years, Maggie had kept that key by the sugar bowl because she said if it lived near the coffee, neither of us would ever forget anything important. When we moved offices after the expansion, I'd tossed the key into a drawer and never thought much about it again. Holding it there in my kitchen, I could almost see her hand reaching past mine for the creamer. "Take it," I said, and held it out to Elaine. She looked at me. "Walt, take it." Very carefully she did. A few mornings later, I drove over before sunrise and parked at the far edge of the company lot with my thermos between my hands. The air still had that cold, gray Ohio feel to it, where dawn takes its time and every piece of metal carries the night a little longer than you expect. The loading dock lights were off. The warehouse sat quiet and square against the morning. Beyond it, the flag by the road moved once in the breeze and then hung still. One by one, the workers began to arrive. Pickup doors opened and shut. A man coughed into the cold. Somebody laughed too loud at something I couldn't hear. Normal sounds. Working sounds. Then Elaine's Subaru turned in headlights, sweeping briefly across the brick front of the office. She parked in my old spot without ceremony, got out in a dark wool coat, and stood for a second with her breath showing white in the air. I watched her walk to the front door. Watched her reach into her bag, watched Maggie's old brass key catch the weak morning light before it went into the lock. She opened the building and disappeared inside. I stayed where I was, hands around the thermos, letting the heater tick softly under the dash. I did not rush to follow. I did not need to. The right person had opened the door, and for the first time in a long while, the morning did not feel like something being decided around me. It just felt cold, quiet, and true.